Good day, everyone. Today I'll focus on writing paper and trying to do a comparison between SPM 1119 English Paper 2, the writing paper, and also the MUET writing paper, which is paper 4 out of the whole MUET exam. And here we are looking at how to bridge the gap from more general proficiency level to more academic English in MUET paper. First, let's take a look at the logistics of time and volume between these two test papers. For SPM English paper, which is paper 2, students are given 1.5 hours to complete 3 distinct tasks. In MUET writing paper, students are only given 75 minutes for 2 distinct tasks. Although the time given is less and the students have fewer tasks to complete, we cannot deny the fact that for the MUET writing paper, it requires a higher density of focus and deeper analytical engagement per task. Let's take a look at the similarities, or what we say the common ground for both tasks. In task 1, students are usually required to write a reply to an email or a letter. In terms of SPM, it is also possible that students may be required to write a reply to a message. In terms of tone and style, both exams utilize an informal style for these specific tasks, while strictly requiring standard of English for the response. In fact, it is true that the foundation of real-world skills of digital and written correspondence remains a vital testing ground in both SPM and MUET curriculums. Let's take a look at the differences now. Students often complain when they move on to MUET Task 2, it is a whole new picture. The reason lies strictly behind the fact that in SPM 1119 paper, students are more tuned towards formal or slightly informal style. The genres for their choices span from writing an article, a report, a review, or even a story in Part 3. Whereas for MUET Part 2, it is strictly argumentative or discursive essay. And for both types of essay, students are required to be highly formal and academic in their language. So, we are looking at the fact that MUET has completely left behind narrative storytelling in favor of more academic argumentation. Now let's take a look at what SPM 1119 English writing paper consists of, and later we'll make a comparison with what the MUET writing paper consists of. In SPM 1119 English paper, Part 1 is a short reply to an email, a letter, or sometimes even a message. In order to write to the reply, students would have to read a short passage of 1 to 2 paragraphs and write their response in about 80 words. However, students are not penalized if they write more than 80 words. For Part 2, which is a guided essay, students are required to write an essay based on normally 2 to 3 short notes given. In this task, they are asked to write for about 125 and 150 words. Again, they are not penalized for writing more than necessary. In Part 3, students are given a choice out of 3, either from a report, a review, article, or usually there will always be a question on story. For this task, students can write for about 200 to 250 words. Usually, students with strong proficiency would write more than 250 words. Now let's take a look at what the MUET writing paper consists of. In task 1, again, students are looking at writing a reply to an email or an informal letter. For this task, students would have to read an email or letter containing 4 main paragraphs with specific notes given. In order to reply, the students must make use of these specific notes to fulfill the task. Students have to write for about 100 words, but usually they would write more than that. Again, there is no penalty for writing more than 100 words. The real test, I believe, is in task 2, which is writing an argumentative or discursive essay. In the first argumentative essay, students are required to take a stand whether they agree, disagree, or partially agree with a statement given. Whereas in a discursive essay, students can present the pros and cons of both aspects and not take a stand. Usually a specific prompt is given for students to respond to. For example, social networking can ruin young people's life. For this task, students are required to write for about 250 words. Since my focus is actually more on MUET, here I would like to highlight the strategic time allocation in order to answer MUET writing paper well. For task 1, which is replying to an email or a letter, students are suggested or recommended to make use of about 25 minutes to complete the task. What they need to do is to analyze the 4 paragraphs and the input, map out their responses to specific mandatory notes given on the right column, and then they start to draft and write a highly targeted 100 plus words reply. For task 2, the recommended time is about 50 minutes. For this task, students have to deconstruct the argumentative or discursive prompt, which is the question statement, and then start to plan the academic structure consisting of an introduction with a stand or a thesis and a thesis statement, 3 body paragraphs, as well as a conclusion. In this case, students are required to write a robust formal essay of about 250 words. Now let's take a look at a diagrammatic representation using a pyramid to see how SPM 1119 paper evolves into MUET. Step 1, let's take a look at what the difference is. From breadth, we go into depth. In SPM, you were tested on your ability to write across multiple genres, for example, stories, reviews, articles, guided essays. Whereas in MUET, it tests your ability to deeply analyze and argue a single complex academic point. Now let's take a look at step 2. In SPM, you're given lots of guidance, but in MUET, you are somehow forced to be more independent. SPM exam provided short, simple notes to help students easily fulfill task requirements. However, in MUET, especially in part 2, students have to deconstruct sophisticated argumentative statements and produce roughly a 5-paragraph essay. In fact, we see the map of helping and supporting students to step confidently into the academic world. SPM 1119 English paper has planted the essential seeds of English proficiency and varied expression. In MUET writing, it is your opportunity to bloom as you are forced to focus your skills into the structured, analytical, and formal communication required by the university environment. It is truly a pre-university test to help prepare students for the more sophisticated university level. I hope my short presentation has been helpful to guide students to look at the differences and similarities between SPM English 1119 paper and the MUET writing paper. Good luck in your exam.